There are moments in history when a single sentence can destroy lives. When a few words written in ink carry more danger than a loaded gun. When knowledge itself becomes a curse. In the American South of the 19th century, reading was not just power. For some men, it was a death sentence. This is the story of a secret hidden inside a letter. A secret read by the wrong man. A man who was never supposed to read at all. Some truths are so dangerous that simply knowing them can get you killed. The year was 1852. The Charleston Plantation District stretched across the low country of South Carolina like a vast green quilt stitched together with rivers, rice fields, and cotton rows. Each plantation was a world of its own. A place ruled by strict order, fear, and silence. Among them stood the Hightower Plantation, known throughout the region for its perfect discipline. Nothing went wrong at Hightower. Crops thrived. Workers rarely ran away. Profits stayed high even when other plantations struggled. Planters whispered about it in Charleston clubs and drawing rooms. They asked Samuel Hightower for advice. They praised his methods. Samuel Hightower accepted the praise calmly. He always said the same thing. Success came from order, from systems, from putting the right person in the right place. What he never said was that his greatest advantage was a secret locked behind the walls of his office. That secret was named Thomas. Thomas had arrived at the plantation as a child. He was 9 years old when Samuel Hightower bought him at a Charleston slave auction. The record described him in a single cold line. Boy healthy, no defects. But Hightower noticed something others did not. While the auctioneer read prices and descriptions, the boy's eyes followed every written word. His lips moved slightly as if he were sounding them out. Reading, quietly, carefully. In South Carolina, it was illegal for enslaved people to read or write. Literacy was considered dangerous. Knowledge led to questions. Questions led to rebellion. So reading was punished with the whip or worse. Samuel Hightower did not punish the boy. He took him home. At first, Thomas was given simple tasks. Cleaning the plantation office, sorting papers, carrying letters. But Hightower watched him closely. He left written notes on desks. He misplaced ledgers on purpose. And each time, Thomas reacted in ways only a reader would. By the time Thomas was 12, the truth could no longer be denied. One afternoon, Hightower closed the office door and spoke quietly. You understand that what you can do is illegal. If anyone finds out, you could be sold far south or killed. But I have a use for you. It was not an offer. It was a command wrapped in kindness. From that day on, Thomas became something no enslaved man should ever be. Educated, he learned to read perfectly. He learned to write in neat professional script. He learned arithmetic, accounting, and correspondence. Slowly, carefully, always in secret. Thomas became Hightower's personal clerk. His private secretary, the only enslaved man on the plantation trusted with letters, contracts, and ledgers. The rewards were real. Thomas did not work in the fields. He lived in a small room beside the office. He ate better food. He wore clean clothes. He was never whipped, never rented out, never threatened with sale. But the price was heavy. The field workers avoided him. They believed he reported everything to the master. The house servants spoke to him politely but never warmly. Even the overseer Garrett watched him with uneasy eyes. Thomas belonged nowhere. Every morning, mail arrived from Charleston. Letters from northern banks, cotton brokers overseas, family members, friends, enemies. Thomas opened every envelope. He read everything. He knew which planters were drowning in debt, which families were tearing themselves apart over wills, which men preached honor while cheating their partners. He knew secrets that could ruin reputations and destroy fortunes. And he told no one. Until one September morning, when a single letter changed everything. The envelope was ordinary. Charleston postmark. Neat handwriting. A woman's hand. Thomas opened it without hesitation. The letter was from Catherine Hayes. At first, it seemed harmless. She wrote politely. She said she had been referred to Mr. Hightower by a mutual acquaintance. She spoke of discretion, of a private matter. Thomas read calmly. He had seen many letters like this. Then his eyes reached one sentence. I am writing to inform you that your son born to me 17 years ago and named Jonathan Hayes has reached an age where his future must be secured. Thomas stopped breathing. He read the line again. Slowly, carefully. Samuel Hightower had a son. The letter continued. Catherine Hayes explained that she had never wished to cause trouble. She had raised the boy alone. She respected Hightower's marriage and social position. But her parents were dead. Money was scarce. She asked for support, quiet support, education for the boy, help setting him up in life. There were no threats, no anger, just truth. Thomas lowered the paper. His hands trembled. This secret could destroy the plantation. It could ruin Samuel Hightower's marriage. It could spark violence. And Thomas was the only one who knew. He was a man who was never meant to read, holding knowledge that could get him killed. And the worst part was this. The letter had not yet reached its intended reader. If Samuel Hightower discovered that Thomas knew this secret, the arrangement that protected him would end. Knowledge made Thomas useful, but some knowledge was too dangerous. Thomas carefully folded the letter and placed it with the others. Outside, the fields stretched endlessly. Cotton swayed in the wind. Life went on as if nothing had changed. But history had shifted. Because once a secret is read, it can never be unread. And this was only the beginning. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Like this video to support the story. Share it with anyone who loves dark history. And comment below with your thoughts on Thomas's fate. Part 2. Here is Part 2 written exactly to your instructions. Strong engaging hook at the start. Horror and historic tone. Easy simple language. About 1,000 words. No dashes used. Call to action included at the end. Some secrets do not stay quiet. They breathe, they grow, and when they sense fear, they begin to move. Thomas understood this truth the moment he placed the copied letter back inside the old ledger. The secret was no longer just words on paper. It was alive. It was watching him. A white son, born in Charleston, 17 years old, Samuel Hightower's blood. If that truth escaped the walls of the plantation office, it would tear lives apart. Charleston society thrived on appearances. Respectability was armor, reputation was currency, and Hightower's reputation was everything. Thomas sat at the desk, hands folded, face calm. Inside, his heart pounded like a drum. He was holding knowledge that could destroy the most powerful man he knew. And he was powerless to use it. In the world Thomas lived in, knowing too much was often more dangerous than knowing nothing at all. He considered his options. There were none. The only safe path was silence. Still, when Samuel Hightower read Catherine Hayes's letter that evening, Thomas watched closely. His master's face remained unreadable. That alone was unsettling. Hightower was a man who believed in control. Anger usually showed itself. This did not. Prepare a response. Polite, noncommittal. Thomas obeyed. But something had shifted. For the first time since he had been brought into the office as a boy, Thomas sensed that he and his master were no longer aligned. A crack had formed, and cracks let light in, or blood out. Over the following weeks, life continued on the surface. Cotton was harvested, rice shipments were prepared, ledgers were balanced. But beneath the routine, tension coiled tightly. Samuel Hightower traveled to Charleston twice that fall. This was unusual. He preferred letters. Letters could be controlled. Faces could not. When Hightower returned from those trips, he was quieter. He drank more brandy in the evenings. He dismissed servants sharply. His wife Martha noticed. Thomas noticed everything. More letters arrived from Catherine Hayes. Each one was heavier than the last. At first, she wrote with patience. Then with concern. Then with urgency. Thomas read her words before anyone else ever would. He saw the desperation building line by line. She wrote of her son Jonathan. Bright, curious, asking questions, asking about his father, asking why he had no name to inherit. Thomas felt something twist in his chest. He understood what it meant to grow up without answers. To live between worlds and belong to none. Hightower's replies grew colder. Arrangements take time. Be patient. This is delicate. When Catherine mentioned the possibility of her son visiting the plantation, everything changed. Thomas saw it in Hightower's eyes. Fear, not the kind that makes a man tremble. The kind that makes him plan. That letter never left Thomas's thoughts. A white boy arriving at Hightower Plantation. Asking questions. Being seen. Being noticed. It would not matter how discreet Catherine intended to be. Rumors traveled faster than letters. Faster than horses. Charleston would talk. And talking killed reputations. When Catherine's final letter arrived, only 3 sentences long, Thomas felt a chill as he read it. The words were calm. Too calm. I believed you to be a man of honor. Hightower crushed the paper in his hand, then smoothed it carefully. That small act frightened Thomas more than anger would have. Anger burned out. Control did not. From that moment on, the plantation changed. Guards were hired. More than necessary. They patrolled the main road. They watched strangers closely. They questioned deliveries. They lingered near the office longer than before. The house servants whispered. Thomas overheard fragments. Something is wrong. The master is worried. Someone is coming. Thomas said nothing. At night, lying in his narrow bed beside the office, Thomas stared at the ceiling. He imagined the ledger on the shelf. The copied letters hidden inside. Proof. Evidence. A death sentence. He had never planned to use them. But now he wondered if their existence alone put him in danger. Because Thomas understood something crucial. If Samuel Hightower decided to make this problem disappear, he would not hesitate. And Thomas was the problem. One cold December morning, a stranger arrived at the plantation. He came on horseback, well-dressed, carrying a small leather case. He claimed to be a lawyer from Charleston. He requested a private meeting with Mr. Hightower. Thomas felt his pulse quicken. Hightower met the man alone. The office door was closed. Voices were low but intense. Thomas caught only fragments when the door briefly opened. Discretion. Settlement. Silence. The stranger left before dusk. That night, Hightower did not review correspondence. He dismissed Thomas early. As Thomas lay awake, he realized something with sick certainty. This was no longer about money. It was about erasing a mistake. Days passed. No letters arrived from Catherine Hayes. The silence was louder than words. Then, came a new instruction. Thomas was told to prepare travel papers. Not for Hightower, for someone else. A boy, Jonathan Hayes. The order was simple. The boy would be sent north. Quietly, under supervision. His education would be paid for. He would be given distance instead of a name. Thomas understood the plan immediately. Distance was safer than acknowledgement. But plans like this always left loose ends. Catherine Hayes was one of them. And Thomas was another. That night, Thomas took the ledger down from the shelf. He opened it slowly. He read the copied letters again. For the first time, he allowed himself to ask a forbidden question. What would happen if the wrong person found this? The answer made his hands shake. Because once men begin erasing secrets, they start with paper. And they end with people. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with anyone who loves dark American history. Like the video to support more episodes. And comment below with your thoughts on Thomas's fate. Part 3. Here is Part 3 written exactly to your instructions. Strong engaging hook at the start. Horror and historic tone. Easy simple language. About 1,000 words. No dashes used. No dashes used anywhere. Call to action included at the end. Sometimes the most dangerous moment is not when a threat is spoken. It is when someone decides to speak at all. Thomas felt it the instant the words left his mouth. I wonder if it would be possible for me to speak briefly with Miss Hayes herself. The lawyer did not answer right away. He studied Thomas with a new kind of attention. Not as property, not as a messenger, but as something else. A complication. Why would you want to do that? The lawyer asked carefully. Thomas kept his voice calm. Mr. Hightower prefers discretion. If there is a way to resolve this matter quietly, without further letters or legal action, perhaps a direct message would be more effective. The lawyer leaned back slightly. His fingers tapped once against the folded letter. You understand, of course, that you are an enslaved man. You cannot negotiate on your own behalf. I understand, sir. I am only a messenger. The lawyer watched him for a long moment. Then he stood. Wait here. Thomas's heart hammered as the man disappeared into the inner office. This was not part of the plan. Every instinct told him to leave. To return to Garrett. To go back to the plantation and survive. But something stronger held him in place. Knowledge had brought him here. Knowledge might protect him. Or kill him. After several minutes, the lawyer returned. Miss Hayes is willing to speak with you briefly. She is nearby. Thomas nodded. Thank you, sir. The lawyer led him down the stairs and into the cold Charleston street. They walked only a short distance to a modest but well-kept townhouse. Not grand. Not poor. Respectable. Inside, the air smelled faintly of soap and coal smoke. Catherine Hayes stood near the fireplace. She was younger than Thomas had imagined. Perhaps in her late 30s. Her posture was straight. Her face calm but tired. This was a woman who had carried a secret for a very long time. You are Samuel Hightower's man, she said. Yes, ma'am. She studied him. Then her eyes softened. You can read, can't you? Thomas hesitated only a moment. Yes, ma'am. I thought so. She exhaled slowly. He always did choose clever tools. They sat. I won't waste your time, she said. I know why you are here. He is trying to frighten me. Thomas chose his words carefully. Mr. Hightower believes this matter could ruin everyone involved. Catherine gave a short laugh. Ruin. He fears embarrassment. I fear hunger. I fear my son being turned away from doors his blood should open. Thomas felt the weight of her words. He thought of Jonathan at the gate, standing, waiting, watching a house he would never enter. What do you want, ma'am? Thomas asked quietly. I want what he owes. Not affection, not public acknowledgement. I am not a fool. I want security for my son. A future. Something written. Something that cannot be taken away. Thomas nodded slowly. And if he refuses? Thomas asked. Her gaze sharpened. Then the truth will be known. Silence stretched between them. Thomas understood then what Hightower truly feared. Not courts. Not money. Exposure. There is something you should know, Thomas said softly. Catherine tilted her head. Yes, I have seen the letters. All of them, not just yours. Her eyes widened slightly. I know how much he is willing to spend to make this disappear. And I know how far he is willing to go. Catherine's voice dropped. Are you warning me? I am warning us both. Because once men like Samuel Hightower feel cornered, they stop negotiating. Catherine stood. Her hands trembled slightly. What are you suggesting? Thomas hesitated. This was the edge of a cliff. I am suggesting that if this ends badly, no one will protect you. Or your son. Not the law. Not society. Catherine swallowed. Then she nodded once. I will consider what you have said. Thomas rose. There was nothing more he could do. When he returned to the law office, the lawyer was waiting. You spoke with her? Yes, sir. And she is determined. The lawyer sighed. Then this will not end quietly. Thomas returned to the wagon. Garrett did not speak as they began the long ride back to the plantation. But Thomas felt something had shifted again. He had crossed another line. Back at Hightower Plantation, Samuel Hightower listened as Thomas delivered the lawyer's response. He said nothing at first. Then he smiled. A thin smile. So they intend to push this, he said. Yes, sir. Hightower stood and walked slowly around the office. Then we will end it. Thomas felt cold spread through his chest. End it how, sir? Hightower stopped and looked directly at him. There are many ways to solve a problem, Thomas. Some involve money, some involve influence, and some require silence. The next day, orders were given. The guards were doubled again. Travel into Charleston was restricted. Correspondence was screened more aggressively than ever. And one more thing. Thomas was told he would no longer travel alone. From now on, Garrett would be with him at all times. That night, Thomas returned to the office alone. He took the ledger from the shelf. He removed the copied letters and wrapped them carefully in cloth. If Samuel Hightower decided to erase this problem, Thomas would not be erased quietly. Because secrets have a way of surviving. And knowledge, once written, does not die easily. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Like the video to support the series. Share this story with lovers of dark American history. And comment below what you think Samuel Hightower is planning. Part 4. Here is Part 4 written exactly to your instructions. Strong engaging hook at the start. Horror and historic tone. Easy simple language. About 1,000 words. No dashes used anywhere. Call to action included at the end. There is a moment when a man realizes that obedience will no longer save him. When silence becomes as dangerous as speech. When survival demands a choice. Thomas felt that moment arrive the night Samuel Hightower decided to end things. The plantation was unusually quiet. Too quiet. Even the insects seemed to have withdrawn, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Thomas lay awake in his narrow room beside the office, listening to footsteps pass back and forth outside. Guards. More than usual. Something was being prepared. At dawn, Hightower summoned him to the office. Thomas entered and stopped. Short. Garrett was there, standing near the door. 2 guards stood outside the windows. The office felt smaller, tighter. Sit, Thomas, Hightower said calmly. Thomas obeyed. I have considered this situation very carefully, Hightower began. Miss Hayes has chosen a foolish path. She believes law and sentiment will protect her. They will not. Thomas kept his face still. The problem is not the woman, Hightower continued. Women can be discredited, shamed, silenced. The real danger is the boy. Jonathan Hayes. Thomas felt his stomach tighten. A young man with questions is a dangerous thing, Hightower said. He shows up at my gate once. He may try again, or he may speak to others. That cannot be allowed. What do you intend to do, sir? Thomas asked quietly. Hightower smiled again. That thin controlled smile. I intend to remove the cause. Garrett shifted slightly. Thomas noticed. Jonathan Hayes will be sent away, Hightower continued. Far away. North. Or west. Somewhere he will disappear into the noise of the world. And his mother? Thomas asked. Hightower looked at him sharply. She will be handled. The meeting ended quickly after that. Thomas was dismissed. As he left the office, he understood something with terrible clarity. This was no longer about money or reputation. This was about destruction. That night, Thomas acted. He waited until the guards rotated. Until the house went still. He returned to the office and retrieved the wrapped letters from his hiding place. He added more. Ledger entries. Travel documents. Notes written in Hightower's hand. Proof. Enough to tell a story. Enough to destroy a man. But proof was useless without a witness. And witnesses in the South were easily silenced. At first light, Thomas made his decision. He would not run. Running would mean chains. Dogs. A body in the swamp. Instead, he would place the danger where Hightower could not ignore it. In public. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Hightower announced he would host a small Christmas gathering for neighboring planters and their families. A show of stability, respectability, normalcy. The plantation buzzed with preparation. Thomas saw his chance. On the evening of the gathering, guests arrived in carriages. Laughter echoed across the grounds. Music drifted from the main house. Thomas moved quietly. He slipped away from the office carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He did not go toward the fields or the quarters. He went toward the main house. Toward the library. The room was empty. Candlelight flickered over shelves of books most enslaved people were forbidden to touch. Thomas placed the bundle carefully on the large writing desk. Then he waited. Samuel Hightower entered the library alone. He stopped when he saw Thomas. What is this? Hightower asked sharply. Insurance, Thomas said. Hightower stepped closer. He unwrapped the cloth and froze. Letters. Copies. Evidence. Where did you get these? Hightower demanded. I made them, Thomas replied calmly. Over the years. I kept them safe. Hightower's face hardened. You understand what this means. This is theft. Treason. This is truth, Thomas said. And truth has weight. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Hightower laughed softly. You think this protects you? I think it makes me visible, Thomas replied. And that is what you fear. Hightower's voice dropped. You are property. Thomas met his eyes. I am a witness. The silence between them was broken by footsteps in the hall. Voices. Guests drawing near. Hightower looked toward the door. If you reveal this, Hightower said, you will be destroyed. If you erase them, Thomas replied, I will reveal it all. Hightower stared at him. Then slowly, something changed. Calculation replaced anger. What do you want? Hightower asked. Thomas answered without hesitation. Protection, written, and eventual freedom. Hightower laughed again, louder this time. Freedom. Yes, sir. Hightower leaned closer. You will never be free. Thomas held his ground. Then neither will your secret. Another pause. The door handle rattled. Hightower straightened. Very well, he said softly. We will discuss this later. Thomas shook his head. No, sir. Now. Hightower's eyes flashed with rage. But the footsteps were closer now. Reluctantly, Hightower nodded. Take them back, he said. We will talk tomorrow. Thomas gathered the letters. As he left the library, his legs trembled. He had crossed the final line. That night, Jonathan Hayes was seen boarding a ship bound north. Catherine Hayes vanished from Charleston days later. No one ever learned where she went. And Thomas was never again allowed to leave Hightower's sight. The plantation returned to order. But the fear remained, because Samuel Hightower now knew something he could never forget. His most valuable possession had become his greatest threat. And Thomas knew something too. This story was far from over. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with friends who love dark American history. Like the video to support the series. And comment below what you think Samuel Hightower will do next. Part 5. Power does not forgive betrayal. It remembers. It waits. And when the moment is right, it strikes quietly. After the night in the library, Thomas understood one terrible truth. He was no longer just useful. He was dangerous. And dangerous things do not survive long in a world built on control. The plantation felt different the next morning. Not louder. Not harsher. Calmer. Too calm. As if everyone were playing a part in a play that only one man had written. Samuel Hightower did not summon Thomas to the office. That alone was unusual. For 12 years, Thomas had started every morning at that desk. Sorting letters. Reviewing ledgers. Breathing paper and ink. Instead, Garrett appeared at his door. The master wants you in the main house today, Garrett said. Thomas nodded. The walk felt longer than usual. Guards stood at intervals along the path. Their eyes followed him. Not hostile. Watchful. Inside the house, Hightower waited in the dining room. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. The table was set with silver and china. Sit, Hightower said pleasantly. Thomas sat. We will speak plainly today, Hightower continued. Last night was unfortunate, but it revealed certain realities. Thomas said nothing. You have information that could damage me, Hightower said. That makes you a liability. Thomas met his gaze. And I have information that protects me, he replied. Hightower smiled thinly. For now. Hightower leaned back in his chair. I have decided not to destroy you. Thomas felt a flicker of relief but did not show it. Not because of mercy, Hightower continued, but because it would raise questions. Questions invite attention. Instead, I will contain you. Thomas understood. You will no longer handle correspondence, Hightower said. Your access to letters and records ends today. Thomas felt the loss like a physical blow. You will remain on the plantation grounds at all times. You will sleep where I can see you. You will work where I can watch you. And the letters? Thomas asked. Hightower's eyes hardened. They do not exist. Thomas said nothing. Garrett stepped forward. You will move into the room behind the kitchen, Garrett said. Effective immediately. That room had no windows. By noon, Thomas's world had shrunk to a few dark walls. He was given work that kept his hands busy but his mind trapped. Polishing silver, sorting supplies, carrying trays. The servants avoided his eyes. Word had spread. That night, Thomas lay on his narrow bed listening to the house breathe. He knew Hightower would not act quickly. Men like him preferred slow solutions. Solutions that left no marks. Days passed. Jonathan Hays had disappeared north. Catherine Hayes was gone. Charleston was silent. But silence did not mean safety. One afternoon, Thomas overheard two guards speaking near the stable. The boy almost made it, one said. His mother too, the other replied. Shame. Thomas's blood ran cold. That night, Hightower summoned him again. I have been generous, Hightower said, pouring himself brandy. I have allowed you comfort. Education. Purpose. Yes, sir. And in return, you threatened me. I protected myself, Thomas replied. Hightower's jaw tightened. Protection is a privilege. He leaned closer. Tell me, Thomas, where are the copies? Thomas hesitated. Hightower slammed his glass down. You think I have not searched? You think I have not torn that office apart? Thomas's silence answered him. Hightower stood. Very well. We will try another approach. The next morning, Thomas was taken to the fields. Not to work, to watch. A man had been caught stealing food. A young field hand. Thin. Desperate. The punishment was public. Thomas stood among the others as the whip cracked. He watched flesh split. He heard screams cut short. This is order, Hightower said quietly beside him. This is what happens when rules are broken. Thomas said nothing, but inside, something hardened. That night, Thomas made a decision. He would not wait. The copies were hidden deep beneath the floorboards of the old smokehouse. He had placed them there years ago. Insurance he never expected to need. Now he needed it. The problem was simple. How do you expose a secret when you are locked inside it? The answer came unexpectedly. Reverend Collins arrived the following Sunday. He was a visiting preacher from Charleston. Respected. Well-connected. A man whose words traveled. Thomas saw him speak with Hightower after the service. Saw the tension. Later that evening, Thomas was summoned to the parlor. You will serve tea, Hightower said. Thomas poured carefully as the men spoke. The Reverend glanced at him. You are educated, he said. Yes, sir. Hightower stiffened. The Reverend smiled faintly. Education is a dangerous thing. Thomas met his eyes. So is ignorance, sir. Silence fell. Later, as Thomas collected cups, the Reverend slipped something into his hand. A folded scrap of paper. That night, Thomas opened it. If you wish to speak, come to the churchyard tomorrow at dusk. Thomas knew it was a trap. Or a lifeline. At dusk, he went. The Reverend waited alone. I know about the boy, the Reverend said softly. Charleston talks. Thomas said nothing. I know what kind of man Hightower is, the Reverend continued. And I know what he does to problems. The Reverend met Thomas's eyes. Do you have proof? Thomas hesitated. Then he nodded. The Reverend exhaled slowly. Then we may yet save lives. As Thomas returned to the house, he felt fear. Hope. And something else. Resolve. Because secrets rot when buried too long. And this one was ready to surface. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with friends who love dark American history. Like the video to support the series. And comment below whether you think Thomas can survive what comes next. Part 6. There comes a point when fear stops protecting you and starts controlling you. And when fear takes control, it whispers the same lie every time. If you wait a little longer, you will be safe. Thomas had waited long enough. The churchyard was empty when he returned the next evening. Wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of damp earth and old stone. The graves stood like silent witnesses, names carved into rock, stories erased by time. Reverend Collins arrived without sound. He stood beside Thomas, hands folded, eyes forward. You understand what you are risking, the Reverend said quietly. Yes, sir. Once this begins, there is no turning back. I know. The Reverend nodded. Then tell me everything. Thomas spoke. He told him about the letters. The child. The threats. The guards. The disappearance of Catherine Hayes. The ship that carried Jonathan north. He spoke calmly, steadily, as if reading from one of the ledgers he once kept. When he finished, the Reverend was silent for a long time. This is not just scandal, he said finally. This is violence wrapped in respectability. Yes, sir. Do you have proof? Thomas nodded again. I can retrieve it. The Reverend's voice dropped. Then we must act quickly. The plan was simple and deadly. The Reverend would travel back to Charleston with proof. He would place copies with people Samuel Hightower could not easily silence. A newspaper editor. A judge known for his stubborn sense of law. A Northern Abolitionist society that documented abuses. Not to publish yet. To hold. Leverage. Insurance. Thomas would remain on the plantation and survive. That night, Thomas returned to the smokehouse. He lifted the floorboards carefully. The papers were still there. Dry. Intact. Truth preserved in ink. He wrapped them tightly and hid them beneath his clothes. The next morning, Reverend Collins requested breakfast with Samuel Hightower. They spoke politely, smiled, drank coffee. I will be returning to Charleston today, the Reverend said casually. I will pray for your household. Hightower smiled thinly. Safe travels. As the Reverend rose, his eyes met Thomas's. Just long enough. That evening, the Reverend was gone. 2 days later, everything changed. A rider arrived from Charleston at dawn. Breathless. Urgent. Hightower read the letter alone. When he emerged, his face was pale. Thomas was summoned immediately. You have betrayed me, Hightower said without preamble. No, sir, Thomas replied. I protected myself. Hightower's voice trembled with rage. You think hiding papers will save you. You think spreading whispers will protect you. He leaned closer. Men like me do not fall because of words. Thomas held his gaze. Men like you fall because of witnesses. Hightower stepped back. You are finished here. That night, Thomas was locked inside the old storage cellar beneath the house. No windows, no light, only stone and damp air. He waited. Above him, voices argued. Footsteps rushed. Orders were given and countered. By morning, Charleston had begun to stir. The Reverend's copies had reached their destinations. Not published. Not yet. But known. Hightower received another letter. Then another. Requests for meetings. Polite inquiries. Subtle warnings. Discretion is advisable. The cellar door opened. Garrett stood there. You are to be moved, he said. Thomas was taken not to the fields. Not to the quarters. To the office. Hightower sat behind the desk. You have forced my hand, Hightower said quietly. Thomas said nothing. I can destroy you, Hightower continued. Slowly, quietly. Yes, sir. But if I do, those papers surface. Yes, sir. Hightower exhaled. I will grant you protection. Limited. You will be sold north. Thomas blinked. Sold. To a friend in Philadelphia. A man who understands discretion. You will not be free. But you will be alive. Thomas considered this. And the letters. They will be returned. All of them. Thomas shook his head. Copies exist. Hightower closed his eyes. Then you will be freed. Silence. Freedom is a dangerous word, Hightower said. So is exposure, Thomas replied. Days passed in negotiation. Finally, an agreement was written. Signed. Witnessed. Thomas would be manumitted upon transfer north. Quietly. No announcement. No celebration. The copies would be sealed and held by trusted hands. Never published unless Thomas disappeared. The cellar remained empty. On a cold morning in February, Thomas left Hightower Plantation for the last time. He did not look back. Charleston faded behind him. Then South Carolina. Weeks later, news traveled south. Catherine Hayes was alive, living quietly under a different name. Jonathan Hayes had enrolled in a northern school. Samuel Hightower remained respected, untouched, but changed. Because power never forgets the moment it was challenged. And Thomas never forgot the sound of keys turning in a lock. He had survived, but survival carries scars. Freedom was not safety. It was simply the beginning of another fight. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with friends who love dark American history. Like the video to support the series. And comment below whether you think Thomas is truly safe now. Part 7. Freedom can be louder than chains. It brings choices. And choices attract consequences. Thomas learned this truth the moment the ship docked in Philadelphia. The city smelled different from the south. Coal smoke. Wet stone. Cold air that cut through cloth. Men and women moved quickly through the streets, speaking freely, arguing openly. No one looked at Thomas as property. They looked at him as a man. That frightened him more than any whip ever had. He carried his manumission papers folded inside his coat. Thin sheets of paper that had cost lives and nearly taken his own. Proof that he belonged to himself. Or so he believed. The man Samuel Hightower had sold him to was named Edwin Mercer. A merchant. A quiet man with careful eyes. He greeted Thomas politely and did not raise his voice. "You are free here," Mercer said. "Truly free. But freedom does not mean safety." Thomas nodded. Mercer explained the arrangement. Thomas would work in his accounting office. Clerical work. Ledgers. Letters. The skills he knew too well. In return, Mercer would provide housing, wages, and discretion. Discretion again. That word followed Thomas like a shadow. At night, Thomas lay awake listening to the city. Horses, carriages, voices shouting in the distance. Somewhere, laughter. Somewhere else, a fight. Freedom was not peaceful. It was alive. Weeks passed. Thomas settled into routine. Work by day, reading by lamplight at night. For the first time, he chose his books. But something felt wrong. Letters arrived for Mercer. Letters that made the man frown. Letters he did not share. One evening, Mercer locked the office door before speaking. "You should know this," he said. "Samuel Hightower has been asking about you." Thomas felt cold settle into his bones. Asking how? Quiet inquiries. Through business contacts. Through churches. Through men who owe him favors. Thomas said nothing. Mercer continued. "He wants to know where you are. Whether you are alive. Whether the papers are safe." "They are," Thomas said. Mercer nodded. "But secrets do not like distance. They travel." That night, Thomas dreamed of the plantation. Of locked doors. Of footsteps above his head. In the dream, the cellar door opened. Someone was coming down the stairs. The knock came a week later. A man stood outside Thomas's lodging. Well dressed. Southern accent softened by politeness. "Mr. Thomas," he said, "I believe we have mutual acquaintances." Thomas did not invite him in. The man smiled. "I bring a message from Charleston." Thomas waited. "Mr. Hightower wishes you well," the man said. "He hopes you are adjusting." Thomas said nothing. "He also wishes to remind you that agreements are only as strong as silence." The man stepped closer. "Accidents happen in cities like this." Thomas met his eyes. "So do witnesses." The man smiled again. Thin, unfriendly. "Be careful, Mr. Thomas." The next morning, Mercer insisted Thomas move. New lodging, new name, fewer routines. But the feeling remained. Samuel Hightower had not forgotten. Then the letter arrived. From Catherine Hayes. She wrote cautiously. Thankful. Alive. Jonathan was well. Educated. Curious. Asking questions. She ended with a warning. "There are men asking about you." Thomas folded the letter slowly. The past had followed him north. One evening, Mercer introduced Thomas to a group of abolitionists. Quiet people, careful people, writers, lawyers, preachers. They listened as Thomas spoke. "Not everything. Enough." One of them spoke softly. "If Hightower is hunting you, the safest place may be the loudest." Public testimony. Thomas felt fear twist inside him. "If I speak publicly, he will destroy everything." The man nodded. "If you stay silent, he may destroy you." Days later, Thomas learned the truth. Catherine Hayes had died. Not from illness. An accident, the papers said. A fall. A broken neck. Jonathan disappeared. No records. No letters. Thomas understood immediately. The agreement was dead. The copies were his only protection. The abolitionists urged him to publish. To tell his story. To expose Hightower and men like him. Thomas hesitated. He knew what exposure cost. But he also knew what silence invited. That night, Thomas wrote. He wrote everything. The plantation. The letters. The threats. The cellar. The deal. Names. Dates. Proof. By morning, the manuscript was complete. Mercer read it and paled. "Once this is out, there is no hiding." Thomas nodded. "I have been hiding my whole life." The pamphlet was printed quietly, then shared, then copied. It did not name Samuel Hightower directly. It did not need to. Charleston recognized itself in the mirror. Within weeks, whispers spread. Accusations followed. Investigations began. Samuel Hightower denied everything, but the damage was done. Business partners withdrew. Friends distanced themselves. Eyes watched him now. Thomas watched from the north. He did not feel victory. Only exhaustion. One night, a fire broke out in his lodging. Small, contained. A warning. Thomas moved again, but this time, he did not run alone. His words had allies. And power fears nothing more than truth that refuses to stay buried. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with friends who love dark American history. Like the video to support the series. And comment below if you think Samuel Hightower will finally fall. Part 8. Truth does not end a nightmare. Sometimes it wakes it up. Thomas understood this when the pamphlet reached the South. At first, the reaction was quiet. Polite denials, calm letters, statements of outrage written with clean hands and careful words. Samuel Hightower called it lies from a bitter man. A northern exaggeration. An attack on honor. But lies have a sound. And people recognized it. Questions followed. Not loud ones. Careful ones. Whispers behind doors. Glances held too long. Business slowed. Invitations stopped coming. Hightower felt the shift. He had survived storms before. He had crushed opposition before it could speak. But this was different. This enemy had already spoken. In Philadelphia, Thomas waited. He stayed indoors. Changed routes. Avoided crowds. Yet fear followed him like a second shadow. Every knock tightened his chest. Every unfamiliar footstep set his nerves on fire. The abolitionists urged patience. The truth is working, they said. Thomas was not convinced. One evening, Mercer arrived pale and shaken. They burned a print shop in Charleston, he said. The one rumored to have copied your pamphlet. No injuries, but the message was clear. Thomas closed his eyes. Hightower was angry. Days later, another letter arrived from the South. Anonymous. Written in careful handwriting. You took something that did not belong to you. Return it, and this ends. Thomas burned the letter. That night, he dreamed again of the cellar. But this time, the door stayed closed. The sound came from behind the walls. Scraping, digging, something trying to get in. He woke up sweating. In Charleston, Hightower met with men he trusted. Men who understood discretion. Men who did not ask questions. One of them spoke plainly. Kill the story, and the man fades with it. Hightower nodded. Another man hesitated. If he dies now, suspicion grows. Then let him live in fear, Hightower replied. Fear is slower, more useful. Back north, Thomas received word that a formal investigation had begun. Quiet, limited, focused on financial irregularities. Not the letters, not the crimes. Money was safer ground. Still, it was something. Then came the betrayal. A man Thomas trusted sold information. His address, his movements, his habits. Thomas realized too late. He noticed the same face twice in 1 week. A man lingering too long near the office. Another standing across the street at night. Mercer insisted Thomas leave immediately. That night, as Thomas packed, the door downstairs creaked. He froze. Footsteps climbed slowly, deliberately. Thomas slipped out the back window and ran into the alley. Cold air burned his lungs. He did not stop until he reached the river. From the shadows, he watched his lodging burn. Not an accident this time. By morning, the city buzzed with rumors. Thomas was dead, lost in the fire. Mercer let the rumor live. Thomas became a ghost, hidden by allies, moved between safe houses, given a new name again. But even ghosts leave traces. In Charleston, the investigation stalled. Witnesses forgot. Records disappeared. Samuel Hightower survived. For now. Then something unexpected happened. A former overseer stepped forward. A broken man. Old. Sick. Drunk on guilt. He spoke to a northern journalist. He spoke of letters. Of children. Of threats. Of a clerk locked underground. He spoke Thomas's name. The story exploded. Newspapers picked it up, north and south, carefully worded but sharp. This time, the name Samuel Hightower appeared. Hightower denied it again, but denial sounded weaker now. The pressure grew. Banks hesitated, partners withdrew, friends avoided him, and then the final blow landed. Jonathan Hays was found, alive, working under a false name on a ship bound for New York. He told everything: the cellar, the threats, the deal, the lies. Charleston could no longer look away. Samuel Hightower was arrested, not for the letters, not for the deaths, for fraud, coercion, abuse of authority. The charges were safe, but the truth hung over the trial like smoke. In Philadelphia, Thomas listened as the news was read aloud. He did not cheer, he did not smile, he waited, because men like Hightower did not fall quietly. From his cell, Hightower wrote one final letter. It was addressed to Thomas. I built my life on silence. You built yours on noise. We will see which lasts longer. Thomas folded the letter carefully. Outside, church bells rang. The nightmare was not over. It was changing shape. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with friends who love dark American history. Like the video to support the series. And comment below if you think justice will truly be served in the end. Part 9. Power is a living thing. It shifts. It hides. It waits. And when it falls, it does not always die quietly. Thomas had thought the worst was behind him. That the pamphlet, the letters, and the exposure had secured him. That freedom was enough. But freedom is fragile. It is a candle in the wind. And wind is relentless. By the time Samuel Hightower stood trial, Thomas had built a life in Philadelphia. Safe houses, new names, careful friends, quiet routines. Yet even there, he felt the eyes. Shadows moved in the corners of alleys, footsteps lingered too long on empty streets. Fear had become a constant companion. News of Hightower's arrest spread slowly through the South. Charleston society whispered, Charleston papers reported cautiously. But the man himself remained a presence. Even behind bars, Hightower commanded respect, fear, and loyalty. Guards spoke of his temper, his ability to manipulate, his quiet authority. Thomas watched it all from the north, hidden but never far from the pulse of the news. He read the reports carefully, noting every detail, every trial, every lawyer, every testimony. He had learned long ago that knowledge could be a weapon. And he was still armed. The trial began on a gray morning. Thomas could only follow it through letters and reports sent by allies in New York. Samuel Hightower stood in the courtroom, tall, dressed impeccably, eyes cold and calculating. The charges were legal, technical, carefully constructed. Fraud, coercion, abuse of authority. Crimes that could be proven without delving into the personal horrors he had inflicted. But the whispers followed him. The letters, the secrets, the story of a boy who had learned to read when he should not have. A man who had been made invisible only to become dangerous. The public did not know Thomas's name, but they felt the shadow he cast. On the 5th day of the trial, a witness appeared. The former overseer who had helped Hightower maintain his control on the plantation. He recounted the cellar, the locked doors, the letters that passed through Thomas's hands. His voice trembled with age and guilt. Every word confirmed the tales the pamphlets had hinted at. Every sentence made Hightower flinch. The courtroom was silent. The judges leaned forward. Journalists scribbled furiously. The power that Hightower had wielded so effortlessly began to fracture. Thomas could feel it in Philadelphia. He read the letters describing the trial and felt the shift. Hightower was human now. Vulnerable. Not untouchable. Then came the testimony that would haunt Hightower more than any court record. Jonathan Hays. The son. The boy Hightower had tried to deny. The boy who had been hidden, educated in secrecy, and now fully grown. Jonathan spoke of his mother, of her courage, and of the letters that proved everything. He spoke of Thomas, without naming him, and the role of the clerk who had preserved the truth when all else had been buried. The courtroom gasped. Hightower's face did not change, but his hands trembled. The power of silence had been broken. And once silence is broken, the world notices. Outside the city, Thomas exhaled slowly. He did not celebrate. He did not smile. He understood the danger better than anyone. Hightower might fall, but he would not fall quietly. And men like him did not forgive easily. That night, Thomas walked through the streets of Philadelphia. Cold air pressed against his face. He kept his coat buttoned tight, hood pulled low. He was free, yes, but freedom had limits. It required vigilance and patience. He remembered the nights on the plantation, the cellar, the letters, the threats, and he understood a truth that had taken years to learn. Power survives by terror, but terror survives only if it is unchecked. Thomas had checked it, but Hightower's reach had been long, and its memory longer. The trial continued for weeks. Each day, the South learned more about the horrors of the plantation, the manipulation, the secrets. Each day, Hightower's empire of fear shrank. Yet even as evidence mounted, supporters whispered in his favor. Old friends, business partners, men who feared what public exposure could bring to their own lives. And in the shadows, Thomas prepared. He watched, learned, and waited. He knew that when Hightower fell, the man would attempt something. A last move, something desperate, something deadly. Then the verdict came. Guilty. Samuel Hightower was sentenced to prison and fines. His public image was shattered. The letters and pamphlets had done their work. The evidence of truth had conquered fear. But even with the verdict, Thomas knew this was not the end. The real work of survival had only begun. Hightower's followers would act. Old threats would re-emerge. The shadows would not dissipate because a man was in chains. In Philadelphia, Thomas met with the abolitionists again. They praised his courage. They offered protection. They spoke of using his story to push for reforms. But Thomas listened quietly. He had learned that courage alone was not enough. Intelligence, patience, and timing mattered more. He thought of the letters once hidden beneath the smokehouse floorboards. The manuscripts that had started a ripple of consequences reaching north and south. He touched them carefully. They were fragile now, more than paper. They were history. They were proof. That evening, a letter arrived for Thomas. It was unsigned, polite, polished, Southern handwriting. "We have not forgotten you." Thomas smiled faintly. Freedom could be pursued, but it was never permanent. He folded the letter carefully, placed it with the others. He would watch. He would wait. He would survive, because he had learned the greatest truth of all. Secrets are power, and power belongs to those who are willing to hold it, to wield it, and sometimes, to let it go at the right moment. If you want to know how this story concludes, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with friends who love dark American history. Like the video to support the series. And comment below what you think will happen to Thomas and the Hightower legacy in the final part. Part 10 Final part. Some stories do not end with justice. Some stories end with survival. Some stories end with the quiet knowledge that power can be challenged but never fully destroyed. Thomas knew this truth better than anyone. After years of fear, letters, and secret knowledge, the final act was upon him. The trial was over. Samuel Hightower was in prison. His wealth had been diminished. His reputation in ruins. But Thomas understood the danger had not vanished. Men like Hightower have long memories, and his allies were still out there. Philadelphia had become home, but it was never safe. Thomas moved through the streets carefully. He had a new identity, carefully crafted with the help of allies who understood secrecy. Each day he walked among crowds that did not know his name, yet his mind was never free. He remained a shadow in a city of freedom, aware that his past could catch up with him at any moment. The letters he had hidden, the copies of Hightower's correspondence, the pamphlets exposing the plantation, all had done their work. They had toppled a man who had once seemed untouchable. They had brought justice to the widow who had suffered in silence and given voice to a son who had been denied his father. But Thomas knew the real victory was survival. He had endured. He had kept his life. And he had learned the value of patience and discretion. News from the South continued to filter in. Hightower's prison sentence was harsh, though carefully managed to avoid public scandal. The banks he had controlled seized his accounts. Former allies abandoned him. Charleston society spoke in hushed tones about the horrors he had inflicted. But Hightower remained a man of influence even behind bars. Old letters suggested quiet communications, subtle manipulations, and threats that reached Thomas's ears through anonymous channels. Even in chains, the man's reach persisted. One morning, Thomas received a visitor. A messenger, young and anxious, carrying a note from Jonathan Hayes. The son had traveled north quietly. He was educated, cautious, and determined. He had learned from his mother's courage and Thomas's discretion. Thomas opened the note carefully. Jonathan wrote of gratitude and trust. He had learned about the plantation, about the cellar, about the hidden letters. He understood the risk Thomas had taken to preserve them and to ensure that the truth would survive. He wanted to meet, to speak carefully, and to plan for a future free from fear. Thomas smiled faintly. After so many years of secrecy, he had found a kindred spirit. A young man who had suffered because of power, who understood its weight, and who now sought freedom with intelligence and caution. But even as hope stirred, Thomas remained vigilant. There were still threats. Old allies of Hightower, men who had once profited from fear and silence, lingered in the shadows. They had eyes in the city, ears in the offices, and patience to wait years for revenge. Thomas understood that exposure had bought time but not safety. That evening, Thomas walked along the river. The water was dark, reflecting the muted lights of the city. He thought about the plantation, the letters, the cellar, and the fear he had lived under. He thought about Hightower and the men who had allowed such power to go unchecked. He thought about his own life, forged in secrecy, knowledge, and survival. Freedom had been a hard teacher. It had demanded intelligence, courage, and restraint. Thomas had learned that the smallest choices could change lives, that information could be more powerful than swords or money, and that survival required more than courage. It required foresight. Weeks passed, and Thomas began to establish a quiet routine. He worked with Jonathan to ensure the boy's education continued. He helped arrange discreet financial support for Catherine Hayes's family legacy, ensuring that Jonathan could grow up with opportunity. He connected with abolitionists and reformers, sharing knowledge without exposing himself. He became a silent force in a city of freedom, a man whose past gave him insight that few could imagine. Then came the final act of justice. Letters from the South revealed that Hightower had attempted to manipulate guards in prison, to send threats, to re-establish control even behind walls. Authorities intervened. His communications were restricted. His influence waned. The man who had once ruled a plantation with fear now sat powerless, his empire reduced to whispers. Thomas knew he had survived not because he was lucky but because he had understood the rules of power better than Hightower. Knowledge, patience, discretion, and courage had kept him alive. He had navigated a world of fear and secrecy and emerged not only free but intact. One night, as he sat by the lamplight with Jonathan, he reflected on the journey. He had been a boy who could read when he should not have. A man who had hidden truth beneath floors and in ledgers. A man who had preserved life through intelligence and courage. And now, he could pass knowledge forward. He could guide, teach, and protect. He looked at Jonathan and saw hope. Not just for the boy, but for the possibility that truth and courage could endure even in a world ruled by fear. Thomas had learned that power is not only about dominance but also about choice. Choice to act, to remain silent, to preserve, to reveal, to survive. And in surviving, he had transformed that power into something stronger than fear. The shadows of the past would always exist, Thomas knew. But he had learned to move among them without falling. He had learned to wield information wisely, to protect life, and to understand that freedom, once gained, was both precious and fragile. The night ended quietly. The city slept. Thomas and Jonathan planned the future. Letters were organized, funds managed, and safety ensured. The story of the plantation, the letters, the cellar, and Hightower's power had come to an end. Not with vengeance but with survival, intelligence, and foresight. And Thomas understood the final lesson of all, that survival is not only the end of fear but also the beginning of life fully claimed. If you want to explore more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with friends who love dark American history. Like the video to support the series. And comment below on what you think Thomas's future will hold now that the past has finally been confronted.